Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, Calais is introduced to the media how I would prioritize my draft, and a legend gets his due. It's all next. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it starts now.
Hittin Hard is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. Get the latest episodes of Hittin Hard as they become available, and then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So Calais Campbell was introduced to the media yesterday after signing a one-year contract, I believe $7 million with some incentives that could, I think, bump it up to as much as $10 million for the year. One of the things that I thought was interesting that he said was, quote, "My role will be a true defensive end similar to a Cam Jordan type. I don't expect to play more than 60% of the snaps, but just being a veteran leader, being a force on the defensive line." And he talked about how Arthur Smith wanted a violent type of style on his defensive line. But it is interesting to hear Campbell talk about what his role is going to be. So we probably expect a little bit less of a traditional 3-4 kind of defense from what Dean Pease was running if he's playing a true defensive end and if he's going to have his hand in the ground. I'm okay with all of that. I mean, look, any way that he can get to, I don't care if he starts out standing on his head to get to the quarterback. If that's what makes him comfortable and that's the way he's going to produce on the field, I don't really care. I don't care if he turns his back to the offensive lineman that he's facing and then spins around and immediately. I don't care. I really don't care. But we do kind of maybe have a little bit more of a snapshot of what he's going to do. Now, the 60% of the snaps thing is also interesting because we talked about last week on the show that 11 of the 14 games that he played in last year, of the 14 starts that he made, 11 of those, he played in 60% or more of the snaps. Now, I would tell you, and we said this last week, that I expect that number to go down a little bit. And probably not just the veteran status that he has, but trying to keep him healthy, keep him fresh. If you look at his snap counts in the early part of the season versus the second half of the season, he certainly started trailing off. The injuries crept up. He missed a few games, and his snap count started to go down a little bit. And, by the time he got to the playoffs, I mean, he played about 62% of the snaps in the playoff game, but his snap count was trailing off at the end of the regular season. So I want to use him in a way where he can be, I don't want to say fresh toward the end of the season, but I guess as fresh as you can be for a 37-year-old defensive end. So if that's 40% of the snaps, and if we draft a guy at 8, and you've got, Grady and Onyemata, and we got Ebiketie and Lorenzo Carter, you can certainly mix up that rotation of guys to where you can probably keep him at about 40 to 50% of the snaps. But even he kind of conceded the idea of, look, I don't know how much longer I'm going to play in all of this kind of stuff. Hopefully what it is that we can squeeze one last drops of juice out of that lemon and get some production. And then at the same time, he can mentor. And this is why I talk about the idea of having a Jalen Carter or maybe a Keon White, who's a bigger defensive end, right? Calais is 6'8", 300. Keon White is 6'5", 285, right? I mean, so more than even, and again, it's not that he can't mentor a Nolan Smith or somebody like that, but looking a guy like Keon White who's watching what this guy does at 6'8", 300 pounds to be able to succeed in the NFL. So look, whatever his role is going to be, obviously it's going to be a rotational role. I don't think that he is going to start 14 games. Last year, he played in and started 14 games for the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think he's got 14 starts in him, and I don't think that he's going to play a high percentage of snaps. But if you can maximize his production, if you can bring his snap percentage down, but it's high impact, right? It's high impact. And look, if he's thinking that he's going to be on first and second down, then, he may start a good amount of games. I don't know that you need to do that, but maybe that's what the plan is. So look, at the end of the day, this is a really good addition for this football team. I mean, as we've said, this was a really good acquisition that the Falcons made. And the fact is that he was picking the Atlanta Falcons. And he talked about in this press conference, we could surprise some people. I think we're going to be better than what some people think we are, and all this other kind of stuff along with it. So I'm all on board with all this. The idea that he picked us as a franchise, that he thinks that he sees the talent and the ability to win games and contend and be a viable franchise, I'm all on board with all of that. What his role is going to be, I don't know. I mean, we won't know really a lot of that until we get into the regular season. Look, is he going to even play in preseason? I don't even know how much he's going to get as far as snaps go in preseason, probably 8 or 10. But he's, I think he's going to be a definite factor on their defensive line. I think that he is going to have a good rotation of snaps. Whether he starts week in, week out will be another thing. I do think that if they draft a defensive end or edge player at number 8, that will go a long way to determining about whether or not he's going to play a starting role. Maybe they start him early on in the season, and let the number 8 pick kind of learn and mentor underneath Calais Campbell. And then as the season goes along, you work the 8th pick overall into the starting rotation. And that was some of the things that, honestly, Ebiketie didn't get a chance to do last year. Ebiketie had the one start, and, as they kind of fell out of playoff contention and all this kind of stuff, I was really wanting to see Ebiketie make more starts and get more of the flow of the game. And arguably he had his best game when he started last year. And, again, we talk all about Ritter, about the idea of, okay, maybe he should have started more. Ebiketie should have definitely started more. There should have been more flow to Ebiketie, not just the one start, but, Carter playing 75% of snaps. I definitely think that there was a missed opportunity with Ebiketie to get him starting and get him in the flow of the game. So we'll see what Campbell's role is going to be. But obviously, look, if he's going to play defensive end, no problem with that. He's a guy that probably kind of dictates what he's going to do with all the success that he's had and all the years that he's played. And at his status and age, he's coming in and he's talking with the coaches saying, okay, where can we maximize your talent the most? And I think that that's what they're going to try to do with him. May only be about 40% of the snaps. But again, if they can get the same kind of production that he gave the Baltimore Ravens last year, we're going to be in pretty good shape when all is said and done. All right, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Listen, as we're headed toward the last week of the NBA regular season and playing around tournament games are going to be coming up here soon, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And when you're a new customer to FanDuel, you can sign up at FanDuel.com and claim your no-sweat first bet, where you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. You can bet on everything from money lines to props to who's going to win, everything in between. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So head to FanDuel.com/lockedon today. FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON today and sign up and claim your no sweat first bet, where if your first bet doesn't win, you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. So obviously we are in a couple of days, the draft will be 2 weeks away, right? I mean, we're creeping up on it here very, very quickly, and the draft is going to be right around the corner. So we've talked before about what my priorities are for the first overall pick. We talked yesterday about some of the things to do with the second round and third round picks. So this is how I prioritize my draft, okay? And yes, I understand best available player and all that kind of stuff. And, again, we've had 5 straight losing seasons and we can't figure out why. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But here's where I prioritize my draft from a positional standpoint, right? Yes, best player available could fall and this, that, and the other. But again, if Bijan Robinson is at 8, is he the best available player over anybody else we could pick? If Jalen Carter is there at 8, will the Falcons select him? Here's where I prioritize my draft. Let's start with edge. First and foremost, edge, okay? I understand there's a lot of good cornerbacks and this, that, and the other. We'll talk about that in just a second here. But I have to sack the quarterback. And the one thing that I am big time deficient in is sacking the quarterback. And as you saw with the Philadelphia Eagles, you can't have too many guys that sack the quarterback. As you see with the San Francisco 49ers, you can't have too many guys that sack the quarterback. Where did the Eagles play in the final game? Oh, that's right. They were in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Well, I mean, but San Francisco wasn't very good. They had Mr. Irrelevant at quarterback. Where'd they end up playing in the final? Oh, they were in the conference championship game? Oh, okay. Anyway, so you can't sack the quarterback enough. And this is why I have to sort out who's the best available player at edge. Now, I'll give you 2 exceptions to that rule, okay? I'll give you 2 exceptions. C.J. Stroud, Jalen Carter. If either or both of those guys drops the number 8, that would be the only other way that I would go. If C.J. Stroud magically, and again, this is mythology and unicorns and rainbows, if he found a way to fall to number 8, I select him first and foremost. If Jalen Carter, who may be the most talented guy in the draft, regardless of position, is there at 8, and there's been conflicting reports, would the Falcons take him? Would they not take him? I take Jalen Carter all day long if he's sitting there at number 8. Again, a disruptive force to pair with Grady Jarrett, and now I've got something. Now my edge is probably even freed up. Even if I don't have a top flight guy at edge, I can free up a guy to go disrupt, and we get sacks that way. And Carter obviously is a guy who can disrupt everything on the defensive line. Outside of those 2 players, edge. Whether it's Van Ness, whether it's Tyree Wilson, whether it's Miles Murphy. Again, I don't care about what the name says on the back of the jersey. Get me the best available player at edge. BPA edge. Prioritize that. Get me another young first-round caliber pass rusher in here and do it. And I don't want to hear any nonsense about, well, if the Falcons draft this guy or that guy, they're reaching. Okay? Again, we explain this to you. If you're first-round talent, you are first-round talent. I don't care if you pick 4, 8, 12, 20, 32. Is TJ Watt first-round talent? Yes. Was he picked way too low? If you did that draft over again with TJ Watt, would he go higher? Yes. First-round talent is first-round talent. I don't care where you draft him. 8, 25, 30, whatever. Doesn't matter. You draft a guy who can impact your football team. So again, whether it's Nolan Smith, Keon White, there's going to be plenty of choices. They can sort out all the scouting and everything like that for them. Then I will prioritize cornerback next as far as positional goes. I want a young corner, a physical corner that can come in here and eventually partner up with A.J. Terrell. Now, look, I got no problem with Casey Hayward and seeing what he can do. And if you draft a corner high, maybe that guy does pair up with AJ and you move Casey Hayward to the slot, whatever. Or you play, a high draft pick in the slot. I don't care. But I do think that a young corner to eventually pair with A.J. Terrell on the outside would be my second choice. Then offensive line. I don't care if it's guard. I don't care if it's center or if it's even tackle. Because if Caleb McGarry doesn't work out, he's not on a long-term contract. And you can move off of him from very quickly. So if last year turns out to be his boom year and then everything else is bust around him, then again, I don't care if it's tackle, guard, center, maybe a guy who can play a little bit of both inside, outside. But I definitely think that more offensive line help young in the draft definitely helps. Then I'll say wide receiver. Going out and getting ourselves, and again, I'm not prioritizing a first or second round wide receiver, but if you told me that, a Tillman or a Hyatt or somebody like that falls to the third round, okay, I could be on board with that. If you tell me that a third round pick was invested in a wide receiver, I got no problem with that. And then my final position, look, defensive tackle. You can't have enough defensive tackles on your football team. When you're rotating guys in and out and you want to build up depth and you want young guys, if there's a good young offensive or defensive tackle, I should say, that is falling in the draft, that's got a lot of upside to him, I don't mind spending high capital on one of those guys. Yes, I understand Marlon Davidson didn't work out, but again, you go down that same well. You can't have too many of those guys. No team in the NFL, no team in the history of the NFL said, we've got too much disruption on our defensive line. We have to get rid of some guys because we've got too many good players on our defensive line. That's never been uttered by a coach or a general manager or a fan ever in the history of NFL football. We've got too much disruption on our defensive line. Never been uttered before. Those words have never been put together in a sentence until I said it here on this podcast. It's the first time ever in the history of recorded audio that those words have been all put together at once. So edge player, first and foremost, number one. Then corner, offensive line, wide receiver, defensive tackle. That's my 5 priorities in order of where this team needs to be. Now, I'll obviously do a mock. I do my one and only mock draft that again, not what the pundits think, what if I'm the GM, what I'm drafting, okay? What I'm drafting. And again, maybe, the front office could listen to me a little bit more and maybe we'd have some of these things fixed. But anyway, we wouldn't have as many unicorns and stuff, I guess. But, again, we wouldn't have, we'd probably have our offensive defense line figured out. But anyway, who cares about all that kind of stuff? We got unicorns. But anyway, so with that, edge, corner, offensive line, wide receiver, defensive tackle. And I think the Falcons are in a great spot that they can just sit at number 8 and just let the draft unfold. I think 4 quarterbacks will be taken before the Falcons pick. So there's only 7 picks ahead of the Falcons. If there are 4 quarterbacks taken, that means probably Carter, Anderson, and 1 wild card pick is going to be selected. And you'll be able to just sit back and just watch and monitor the draft as far as just let everything just kind of fall. I don't think the Falcons need to move back and all this. Again, no teams typically don't want to move up to number 8 that are in the middle of the draft. These things don't happen. It's great in theory to say, but usually these things don't really happen. You don't see many 9-1 types of trades in the NFL. That's why this was such a rare thing for the Bears and Panthers to swap those picks out. Jacksonville tried to, make a deal on their number 1 overall pick last year. Didn't work out. So just sit at 8, let the draft unfold, and let these good players just fall down to the Atlanta Falcons, and they'll have their pick of whatever type of position that they want to acquire. All right, after you've made Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day, make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day available Odyssey, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts from. So we got word yesterday that the Braves are going to retire number 25. So another jersey for the rafters. And obviously this is Andruw Jones. And look, it's obviously a long time coming. I guess he was next in line and all this kind of stuff. One of the best center fielders in his generation, 434 homers, 1,289 RBI. He hit 254. He actually stole 152 bases for his career and scored 1,204 runs. And of course, the 2005 season, he finished second in the MVP. I mean, think about this kind of year. Second in the MVP, Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, and an All-Star when he led the league in both homers and RBI with 51 homers and 128 RBI. He had a 2-year run in 05-06 where he hit 92 homers with 257 RBI, 51 and 128, and then he followed it up with a 41 and 129. That's monster back-to-back seasons. And look, what I have a problem with Andruw Jones being in the Hall of Fame, when you think about his numbers now, and you put it in the context of he's maybe the best or one of the 2 or 3 best defensive center fielders in the history of modern baseball, right? I mean, we talk about Willie Mays, we talk about Ken Griffey. It's a very short list of guys. And when you look at the 10 Gold Gloves, and obviously watching him have played every year, you saw how many runs that he saved. You ask those pitchers, Glavine, Maddox, and Smoltz, that you talk about the idea of how many runs that he saved those guys from being scored. They all talk about the idea of Andruw was so important to the defense of that team and all of his run, saving ability out there. Obviously a tremendous player. So kudos to, Andruw. Now let's see what happens with the Hall of Fame, because I think he's one of those guys right there on the borderline. Now, here's what I'll say. If I had to pick between Dale Murphy and Andruw Jones, it seems like the center field position for the Braves has been in good hands for about 25 years, right? I would take Murphy first. I think Murphy, a 2-time MVP of the league, Gold Glove winner. I do think that carries more weight in an era where, yes, he hit 399 homers, and if he'd have gotten to 400, maybe he'd have been in. I don't know. I mean, again, 1 homer would put it over the edge, but maybe it would or whatever like that. If I had to pick between Andruw and Dale Murphy, I still select Dale Murphy for what he did in the 1980s. Maybe the best center fielder of the 1980s and was a 2-time MVP. But I got no problem with Andruw Jones getting to the Hall of Fame. And we'll see how, because I don't expect him to be voted into the Hall of Fame from the writers and all this kind of stuff. And nobody really knows kind of what the writers, what their agenda is. And there is an agenda with the Baseball Writers Association of America. The agenda has been whatever they decide. One guy's good with the media, or maybe it's a guy who didn't do roids, or whatever their particular agenda is. The fact that Bonds and Clemens and all those guys have been left out of the Hall of Fame, and maybe they, again, they probably penalize Andruw because he hit 254, even though even though Bill Mazeroski is in the Hall of Fame and he was voted on by the Veterans Committee, a guy who hit about 250 for his career, but was the most dominant defensive second baseman in his era. Well, Andruw was the most dominant defensive player, and it wasn't like he was a slouch, offensively. Again, 51 homers, 41 homers, multiple times, with 30 homers, several hundred RBI seasons and different things like that. And he was a guy who early in his career was stealing between 20, 27 bases a season. So good for Andruw. Congratulations to him. Certainly going to be a fun ceremony. I had a chance to talk to Andruw Jones about a month or so ago. His kid is now playing, obviously. His kid is doing some outstanding things, but all good for him. And listen, nothing but love and kudos for him. Let's see if there's any kind of movement now to get Andruw into the Hall of Fame and see if he can find his way. Look, I think it's going to be more Veterans Committee than anything. That if he's going to get in the Hall of Fame, it's going to be through a Veterans Committee or whatever they call these modern day committees now and all that kind of stuff. But certainly wouldn't mind his place in Cooperstown with a plaque besides just his number being retired. All right, well, thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available Odyssey, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're getting towards 6,000 subscribers on our YouTube page, so be a part of the community and subscribe to us today. You can get the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available, and then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.